Hello and welcome to this demo on unattended automation with orchestrator folders. In this video, we'll get to run background and foreground jobs with an unattended robot that we're going to set up. And while doing all of this, we'll also cover the concept of job priority. Before we begin, a word on the background and foreground processes. A background process, also called a headless process, refers to a job that runs without interacting with any sort of UI. When built in UiPath Studio, a process needs to be set to start in the background. On the other hand, foreground processes use a graphical UI. Based on this differentiation, a foreground process can run in parallel with one or more background processes in attended automation. For example, let's see how these two processes work in unattended automation scenarios involving orchestrator folders. First, let's start with the setup. The first thing to keep in mind is that unattended robots don't exist as independent entities. As we saw in the previous lesson, they're a combination between a user or robot account and a machine. From this perspective, a better name for a robot is execution slot. But this doesn't sound too exciting, so let's stick to robot. To make the setup simple, one setting is enough. Enable unattended robot for the account. This allows that user to use runtimes to execute unattended jobs on a machine. In Orchestrator, we need to define at least one machine template, which we can then use to connect physical or virtual machines to Orchestrator. It's time to see all of this in action. Let's first navigate to Tenant and then Manage Access. We have a user already added here, and let's view its details. If we navigate further to the Unattended Setup tab, we can see that the unattended robot is enabled. And all of the other information needed is here: domain username, credential store used, and password. Now a quick note here. If we were to run just background automation jobs, then we don't need to set up login credentials. In our case, because we want to run a foreground process as well, we'll keep the credentials defined. Next, let's navigate to the Machines page, where we've already created a machine template. And for this machine template, we've allocated 5 unattended runtimes or licenses. This is the maximum number of jobs that can run at the same time on a machine that uses this template if there are enough licenses available on this tenant. From these 5, there can be a maximum of 1 foreground process at any time. Remember the number of runtimes that we've allocated, 5. It'll be important later in the demo. One important mention here before going further. The ability to allocate more than one runtime and to execute several processes on the same machine is applicable only for Windows Server machines. Let's now navigate to Folders. We've created a folder for our demo today. Keep in mind that both the user and the machine template must be added at folder level. And in our case, we can see that they are. We also need to make sure that the users have at least the automation user role assigned at folder level to be able to run automations. And it's clear that this one does. Let's take a moment to look at the processes before we run the automations. We'll navigate to our folder from the left side menu and go to Processes from the Home tab. Here we have 2 processes. One is foreground, so it'll interact with graphical user interface elements. And the other one is headless, and it'll run in the background. Each process has a specific icon that we can use to identify its type. One last thing to notice on this page is the priority set at process level. In both cases, it's set to medium. This will be important a bit later. Now let's run some jobs. We can do this by simply clicking this button here, Start a Job. We'll start by running the process which requires interaction with graphical user interface elements. The job priority is inherited from the process that we're using, but we can change it just as easily to a higher or lower priority. We'll leave the fields as they are and execute the process 5 times. Let's click Start and see what happens. 5 jobs have been created, but only 1 is running. The other 4 are pending. This happens because at the moment, although we have 5 runtimes or licenses, we only have 1 unattended robot running on a single machine. And since the jobs require UI interaction, the jobs will run in a sequential mode. As soon as the first one ends, the second one starts. Alright, let's now create another set of jobs. This time, let's select the background process. For this one, let's change the job priority to very high. Set the same 5 execution times and hit Start. There are several things to notice here. 4 of the 5 jobs involving the headless process started right away, and the last one of them is pending. This is because a job for the UI-dependent process had started before the 5 headless jobs were ready to start. At this point, all 5 runtimes are being used. As soon as the UI-dependent job ends and a runtime is being freed, the last job for the background process starts. This happens because it has higher priority than the remaining one for the UI-dependent process. The next job from the 2 sets, a UI-dependent job, starts as soon as the background jobs are completed. And the rule stays, maximum 1 job requiring UI. Great, this concludes this demo on unattended automation with folders. Let's briefly recap. We've first seen the details of our user and machine template added in Orchestrator. By adding them to a folder, we could run 10 jobs, 5 using a background process and the other 5 using a foreground process. We've also set the background jobs with high priority to see how it'll behave. Thank you for watching, and until next time, happy automation!